And good morning. We're live on the Falcons Podcast. It is a Monday, and the hint of spring is starting to come along. That must mean it's NFL Combine season. It is NFL Combine week. The men will get started up in Indianapolis this week. Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris are scheduled to speak this week as well. I believe Raheem Morris, or I believe Fontenot goes tomorrow. Not 100% sure on the scheduling. I just know we've got it covered already. But they're going tomorrow. Early. I think the Falcons are the first ones to talk, so we'll be interested to see some of the questions they get about, team building, roster building, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to talk about some of the players we want to keep an eye on at the Combine, take your questions about some of the players that the Falcons could target, any other questions and comments we might have. But before I get started into that, I want to say hello to Nick Kendall. Nick, how you doing? Good morning, my friend.
I am doing pretty well. Can't complain. We are supposed to have right now, I'm kind of sitting on pins and needles because we're supposed to have a major weather event potentially happening tonight where it's a atmospheric river and river and a windstorm that could knock out power and trees and whatnot. So they're saying potentially up to 80-mile-an-hour wind gusts, which around here, saturated soil could be bad. So fingers crossed it doesn't hit us, but we'll see. I'm supposed to cover for Zach and Chad tonight, and depending on when that windstorm happens, might not be physically able to. So we'll see.
Are you? Because I will not be there tonight to help out because we have JV baseball. Johns Creek Gladiators play Roswell at 6. Actually, it's actually a little bit later game, so will not be available to help you out on the back side this evening. But we go live. I know who will be there tonight, because he's here with us every day, is Michael Ronquillo, coming in red and black hot for the Atlanta Falcons. Michael's an adopted Atlanta Falcons fan for sure. Absolutely a friend of the podcast. That's for sure. He says, "Good morning, Scott and Nick on the Falcons podcast." Comes in with $100 red hot super chat. If you're listening and you've never seen the show, YouTube color codes the different super chats. And red is the best, is the highest you can go. And so when I say red hot, it shows up red on the screen. And it's a red hot super chat from Michael. And Michael, this time of year, any time of year, especially during the offseason, it really helps keep the lights on, helps keeps my forehead nice and shiny, keeps our coffee hot and brewed. And can't thank you enough for everything you do for us.
Yeah, appreciate you so much. I mean, what do you even say, right? This is unbelievably generous and supportive. I mean, not to peel back the curtain too much right now. I work in the sciences right now, so things are a little bit uncertain from the NIH side. So everything like this just like personally means and helps so freaking much. So really just thank you so much, Michael.
Yeah, appreciate it, Michael. You're one of the good ones. Like we called you the sunrise, we can count on you just like the sunrise every morning. In fact, I can count on you more than the sunrise because we get cloud cover here. Victor, good to see you, Victor. Says, "Good morning, guys. 2 cornerbacks to keep an eye on, especially for man coverage teams, are Trey Amos and Azarai Thomas. Azarai Thomas looks like an EYE. Would let any of these two at number 46 in the second round if they're available. Have a great show and week, y'all. Appreciate it, Victor. We'll get into those guys, and we'll see if they might be available when we do a mock draft. That was one of the things I wanted to do. At the end of the show, we will do a mock draft on NFL Mock Draft Database.com. That's the board I've used for years. I like the board, and now their mock draft tool is solid. So that's where I've been going to do ours. John Harold, good morning from Idaho. I bet it's chilly in Idaho. Are you racing up there? John races his Mustang, which is just awesome. Shoots me videos all the time. Are you racing up there or just kind of hanging out? Psalm, good to see you. It's been a while. Just finally got up before the show. Good morning, Nick and Scott from California. Yeah, this is I think y'all know I lived out in California for 9 years, and there's certain times that I really miss it. Just the atmosphere and the weather. There's certain times I don't. But there's some really, really wonderful things about the state of California. So I hope you're enjoying your time out there. Steven says his lion's talking to me, but it's not lion. Well, it should be lion. And I just started drinking mine, so I like to play the game. Guess when the caffeine has kicked in for Scott. Usually about the 20-minute mark of the show. And Edward Brown coming in with a super chat as well. Appreciate you, Edward. He says, Will you keep an eye on Nick Emmanwori at the combine? Any chance he makes it to number 46? And I think just he's a safety from South Carolina. And I think that's a tough one. 46 might be too much. Second round, yes, Nick. In that, 33 to 40, really even 45 range. But 33 to 40 range is where you start getting a run on premium players at non-premium positions and safety counts.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. I mean, he is absolutely massive for the position. You watch him, it's like a created player. Wears that single digit too, so just really stands out that way. And a good athlete. I do think he's a little, being 6'3", 230 as a safety, I do think he's a little stiff in the hips, which, to be expected. I've heard the Kyle Hamilton comps, the Derwin James comps. I think those guys were a tier or two above just from the fluidity and the athleticism. Emmanwori is very explosive, don't get me wrong, but in space, sometimes that's it's more about being fluid and reactive than it is to be straight line explosive. Not that he's so stiff that he's going to be a problem. I just think it's a question for him. I think there's a chance he makes it to 46, but this class, it's a fine class, especially day two and that, those day two grades. But I think from pick 15 all the way to 80, boards are going to be extremely mixed team to team. And Emmanwori seems to be the consensus number 2 safety, but is probably the number 1 strong safety, depending on what scheme you run. So I think 46 is not super likely. Right now on the consensus board, he's 32 overall. So again, it's probably a little late for him, as you said there, Scott, but anything can happen.
One of the problems, Nick, is the Falcons aren't in a great position to try and trade up either. It's even to throw we'll throw them a 5th and we'll move up. No, you don't have a 5th. Throw them a 6th, we'll move up. Got news for you there too. You can't do that either. So, when you're missing your 3rd, your 5th, and your 6th round draft choice, it makes it hard to try and move up to get a guy like that.
But maybe you're moving back from 15 down to 40, and then you have a conversation about Emmanwori at that spot or something like that. So if I was the Falcons, I'd be looking to make some moves to add a little bit of cost-controlled contracts to this roster. But that's just me. We always like to trade back, Scott. But yeah, we're keeping an eye on Nick Emmanwori. He's supposed to have a very good combine. A Feldman's freakless player. I think he's going to have a good combine. The combine's always a little bit overrated from a fan perspective because you're not grading these guys twice, right? That's the big thing. We already know Emmanwori is going to test very well. You shouldn't all of a sudden rocket him up to the top 10 because he tests well. He looks like a good athlete on tape already, right? So don't double grade. Now, if he tests horribly, sends you back to the tape. That could change it. If there's something that's jarring that's opposite of what you see on tape, then you can adjust your grade, but you don't want to double grade.
No, and then that's when you start talking pro days also. It's like, why was he so bad? We want to see him again at the pro day. And again, where it can make a difference though is, it just the fine margins. If you really like Mike Green, edge rusher Marshall, who's been mocked to Atlanta a lot, including today's from Pro Football Focus, you don't want him to go out there and run a sub 4.45 and have a 38 to 42 inch vertical leap. You're like, because he ain't going to be there at 15 if he does. So, if you've ever done little league drafts, and rec baseball, you're like, all right, tank. I already know these are the best 4 kids out here. I need you to go out there and boot every ball that's hit your way. B-side rap reviews. He says Scott for GM and Nick for whatever. Nick can be GM. I always like to be the guy behind the guy. For whatever Rich McKay is in 2026. Well, had a discussion on Twitter again. Rich McKay is the boogeyman right now. Bubba Yaga. He's not. I don't always believe. In fact, I rarely believe what I'm being told publicly. But when it comes to staffing, Rich McKay was removed from the Atlanta Falcons operations for anything except rules last January, according to the Atlanta Falcons. It was a very public press release. He's heading up like Atlanta United, and he's the only thing he will have to do with the NFL part of Arthur Blank's business is a liaison for the rules committee. That's it. I believe that. I don't know why you wouldn't. You've seen there's an AP article I linked, even when I said that out there. He's like, at the beginning of the coaching search, it was him and Arthur Blank out there saying how well they've done. It was just tone deaf, awful press conference. And by the time the hire was done, Rich McKay was out. So, I don't know. I don't believe Rich McKay is the problem anymore, y'all. Now, he's done some damage in the past, but I don't think he's the problem. And God Hands presents, I see you. And Nick, I want to get to this. I'm going to pass this over to you also, because you sent me this and I wanted to build off this. Nick sent me a chart. Someone went through and basically combined all the averages and everything. A guy named Colin Dunphy went and basically said, how does the NFL value positions? Well, let's look and see. He did. And he basically, averaged up all of the money that's put into each position and said, this is the financial value of each position. So before we see this, let's go through the Atlanta Falcons roster. Okay. Let's go through the Atlanta Falcons roster. Who would you say their 5 best players are?
5 best.
5 best players on the Atlanta Falcons.
You have Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Bijan, Terrell,
AJ,
Bates,
Jesse Bates,
and Lindstrom.
Yep. And one I would throw in there is probably Caden Ellis, as is in the conversation.
Yeah.
And then I would also say your most valuable pending free agent right now is a center. Is Drew Dahlman. Now, I say that I want to show you this, and I'll do my best to try and describe this to you if you're listening. I say this because these are the positional value tiers, ranked from highest to lowest. Ranked from highest to lowest is quarterback, wide receiver, defensive end / edge, left tackle, corner, and then let's see. No, that's on the left side by average. Sorry, wide receiver, edge. That's defensive tackle, corner, right tackle, corner, guard, safety, guard, linebacker, tight end, running back, and center is how they have it ranked. So the positions that we mentioned as we go up the board are center, running back, linebacker, right guard, safety, corner, and wide receiver. Okay? That's a problem, y'all. You've built this thing upside down. When your most valuable players, your best players, are at the least valuable positions, that's a problem. Now, you're paying those guys premium money because they are really good, but you're looking at this and saying, okay, the only player of my top 8 players on the team, the only one that's at a premium position right now is Drake London. That's a problem. That's a problem with team building. That's a problem with, I don't necessarily go all in on analytics, but I do use it as a guide, and I believe in positional value and value of teams and allocating your resources. And what this says, and Terry agrees. He's saying Lindstrom, Bates, London, Robinson, Terrell. I'd probably go with those 5. I absolutely agree on that. Is the Falcons' pyramid of team building right now is upside down. Now, that can change. That can change pretty drastically with your quarterback, who is cost controlled. And if he ends up being one of your best players, you've got what is the average value of a quarterback of $55 million, basically 20% of your cap. You've got him at significantly less than that, Nick. And then wide receiver. And then, you could get your edge in this class. You went with defensive tackle last draft. The offensive tackle position is going to be interesting here soon.
Yeah. I wanted to give a shout out when you're talking about the value of this. He's not one of your 5 best, but I mean, coming off of an incredible season overall, still Mooney, worth a shout out. Even I feel like he's still kind of even in my brain, a forgotten man, very underrated. Had a heck of a season. And then Matthews is getting older, but been a steady player. And there's just really something to be said about having a tackle that is set and forget, right? Like he's so quiet in a phenomenal way. So he is not one of your 5 best, but definitely I think one of your 5 most valuable. Like if it was an open market and everybody's paid for a year, right? Like Matthews would probably get snatched up because it's just that's the supply side of things. So this graphic is kind of showing the left side chart is showing the cost of every position, where the right side is the access. So guys becoming available in free agency. So I think the sample size is still pretty small. I think he's going to update it later, but it's supply and demand. I think the thing that's most valuable here, and he has it on that next graphic there. It's got the bar chart. If you click the next tweet, he kind of just like ranks it through what's highly paid and not available, highly paid, very highly paid, not available quarterback, highly paid and not available is wide receiver, defensive end, highly paid and sometimes available left tackle, defensive tackle, well paid or not really available right tackle, cornerback. There's all your premium positions right there. And you can kind of see a tier list there. And then after that, positions that you can get in free agency every single offseason. You can find competency and really can find competency at running back at center. So looking at this, the Falcons, just from a team building perspective, I've said it on here every single show since Michael Penix has been named the starter, Scott. Like, defense is obviously the premier spot for this roster. However, what matters even more than that big picture is protecting Michael Penix long term. Yep. And if you have questions about tackle, you see a tackle that you love there, I would not plug my nose at all. Is it going to be the best for this Falcons team in 2025? No, probably not. But am I using the draft for 2025 specifically? Also, no. Everything needs to be, how am I going to protect this asset and protect my butt, general manager, head coach, that is Michael Penix. So, again, it's probably defense, but offensive tackle at least needs to be in the realm of possibility. The caveat there is that it's not a very good offensive tackle class, and there's always demand. So I'm guessing the guys that are even close are going to be scooped up relatively quickly.
Well, and Terry says, how is left tackle, cornerback, defensive end, or defensive tackle not a player listed in your top players on your team? Says it all. Jake Matthews has been one of the top players on this team. He's not quite there. If you were to tell me, I think Jake Matthews he's dependable, he's good, I wouldn't argue with you. Jake Matthews is a good player. He's absolutely a good player. Quarterback, they invested in last year. Okay. They went and got their quarterback last year, invested in Michael Penix. So that is a start in the right direction of trying to, we talk about being upside down on contracts, trying to right the ship when it comes to how should my team be built. That's a good step in the right direction. Edge is a disaster. It's been a disaster for 20 years. With an exception here and there. Edge is a disaster. Defensive tackle, Grady Jarrett has absolutely been one of your 5 best players the last decade. And they reinvested back in that last year. You went and go for Ruka Rohuro. You went for Brandon Dorlus. It's just that the first round guys, the only first round player on defense, and I forgot how far back I looked, but I think it goes back to maybe Tack McKinley in 2017, was AJ Terrell. Everything else has been offense. Was AJ Terrell. AJ Terrell's a good player. The defense shows that lack of investment. You've been okay at quarterback for 15 of the last 20 years. So this is a step towards righting that ship and getting that pyramid, because right now the team's upside down based on where your best players are at your value positions. And when you say value positions, what's another word for value when it comes to why are they value positions, Nick? Impact.
Yeah.
Impact. Jesse Bates is awesome. He could be the 1 or 2 best safety in the league. I'd rather have the 1 or 2 best edge. He's going to have a much bigger impact on your team on that one. So that was very interesting. I wanted to show you all that, and I wanted to run it right off of B-Side Rap Review's comments about being GM, because I thought that was very good. And now I want to get back to God Hands Presents, and I'm going to throw this one to you, Nick.
I did want to ask you real quick, Scott, just about the positional value. Did you find it interesting? It kind of flips on the head a little bit. Wide receiver being both number 2 in cost rank and access rank, with cornerback and tackle dropping down a bit, depending on where you're at. Defensive tackle higher.
I get it. I see the money. I just disagree. If I was general manager, I wouldn't. Wide receiver wouldn't be my second highest invested position. I think the wide receiver position needs a reset. I think there are way too many good wide receivers to be spending $35 million on a wide receiver. I would be in the draft what Kansas City did with Tyreek Hill. I would be in the draft and trade. I'd get 4 years for my receiver, and if I could get 2 first rounders or something like that, and get that pick back plus a little extra, and not have to put 20% of my cap into a wide receiver, that's what I'd do. I would start treating wide receivers like running backs. Draft, develop, trade before they hit their free agent year.
To that makes me sound like you make it sound like we're gonna have a pretty interesting conversation coming up about Drake London, because he is going to get paid.
Yeah, Drake will get paid, and if someone were to offer me, if Drake's gonna get $35 million, 105 guaranteed on a 5-year contract, and someone says, well, we're gonna get 2 first-round draft picks, I'd listen. But right now I'd say, yeah, Drake should get paid. In fact, that's an article we have coming out about extending him. And one of the things about extending a guy, especially as young as he is I can keep the cap number low-ish, but it's valuable. I'd still rather have the edge. I would still rather have an impact edge I'd rather have a $30 million edge than a $30 million wide receiver.
I'm with you. I think the conversation is more interesting as far as the offensive tackle versus wide receiver, and potentially the cornerback versus wide receiver. Because for a lot of, not calling you this, Scott, but the conventional thinking had been that premium positions are quarterback, edge rusher. I'll throw in defensive tackle now, pass rusher, offensive tackle, and cornerback. But the data says wide receiver is right there, if not a step above. And they're in that graphic, or the table, excuse me.
No, my generation, the second highest paid player on the team was left tackle.
Yeah.
It was the quarterback, and then whoever protected the quarterback. It was always the second highest paid, and the left tackles are still well compensated.
Yeah.
Yep. Well compensated.
Wide receivers flown past.
Want to get to the super chat? Thank you, my friend. He says, God Hand Presents coming in green. He says, have y'all checked out Kenneth Grant at 15, 340 pounds, crazy fast and strong, breaks through double teams, a clutch champion in the middle for a decade. I think he's absolutely someone to watch. And when you're watching, his combine will matter. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Watch the explosives. Watch your shuttle time. Watch your L cone. And are they called L cone or 3 cone? Because I feel like I always mess that up. I think they call it 3 cone because I always call it L cone.
Yeah, we know
same thing. It's
I know what you
3
mean.
cones in an L shape. And look at your vertical jumps and your broad jumps. That's going to be the thing. And when I say the fine margins, it doesn't matter. Well, when we're talking about guys at the top of the combine, I mean, the combine matters. It absolutely matters. That's why everybody's there. But if I could go from 25 to 17, I'm making $4 or $5 million extra dollars. Mm-hmm. It matters. And when you're sitting there at 15, this combine really matters, because you're right there in that sweet spot where a lot of those guys aren't set in stone, and there's going to be a lot of movement between 10 and 25 based on how this combine goes.
I'll push back a little bit as far as the combine mattering, just because I've, again, talking to people in the league and really tuned in. It matters. Probably the testing matters less than ever, because teams have on the field GPS data now that is starting to rack up, like, over time, that they're able to standardize it a little bit and see like who's hit and who hasn't based on the data. That's what's made combine so good, right? Like 20 years of standardized data. Now, granted, they added a new turf a few years ago, so now they're
on the Bonneville Salt Flats.
That's crazy.
We ran a 4.28. Yeah, the average for cornerbacks when I was doing combines and when I was doing high school combines. Everybody ran a 4.4, right? Mm-hmm. The average for corners in 2005 was 4.54 at the NFL Combine, and that was the fastest group at the Combine. Was corners at 4.54 was their average. And it's, Nick, if we go and do everybody that actually ran, it's going to be, the corners are going to be above 4.45s overall. As far as the average goes. And when I say it matters, you get a guy like Troy Anderson, who's played at Montana State, and you don't know where he goes. He goes from a day 3 to a day 2 at the Combine. Yeah. No doubt in my mind. Yeah. And like I said, when you've got a Kenneth Grant, if you can go from 20 to 15 based on a combine showing, that matters not just to him and his agent financially. It matters to the Atlanta Falcons sitting there at number 15. So when I say it matters, it's relative, obviously. Yeah. I mean, it obviously matters. They wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So, but how much? That's a relative term. What do you think is important versus what I think is important? I think being able to move up 4 or 5 spots in the first round is important. I say that matter. But in the overall game of things, these guys that are in this tier are still going to be in this tier. They're just going to move around a little bit. You're just going to rearrange the order a little bit, which isn't that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. So in that case, it doesn't necessarily matter. But the medicals and, as you always say, the interviews are huge on this.
Medicals, yeah, exactly. And not doing anything stupid in the interviews. But as far as Kenneth Grant, I mean, yeah, he is unbelievable. I remember, was it last year or 2 years ago, Jim Harbaugh described him, Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, as a God's gift to football. Just, those two massive defensive tackles. Grant is crazy athletic for his size. I'll be curious. You mentioned some of the stuff I'm watching, Scott. I want to see the arm length as well. The hand size matters for those positions. Want to see the 10-yard split, probably more important than the 40-yard dash. That's nice that we have that now to the general public, so that's good. And as far as Kenneth Grant goes, why isn't he getting higher with all the hype there? Plays a little high sometimes. Despite being 6'3", I wish he played with a little bit better leverage. And despite being so explosive and fast, it could be because of the leverage. But he's not always the most. You don't see the most violence when engaging with players. Like for me, the benchmark as far as like when I watch a defensive tackle, I want to see them shock players with their hands. And I think of like Jeffrey Simmons at Mississippi State. I mean, just the amount of power that he had when he engaged. He would jolt guys and then disengage. You don't always see that from Kenneth Grant. Sometimes I feel like you're 340 pounds, play like you're 340 pounds. But as big as he is, the movement skills, just all the raw tools that you have, the versatility too. I mean, he's athletic enough, Scott, that he can play one technique. You can kick him out. I bet you can even get some reps where you're stunting at, 5 or even 7 technique out there. So really love that versatility because the athleticism. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he goes anywhere from 10 to 22 in this class. Plays a valuable position. And that's the other thing also, the defensive line, you can never actually have enough. I saw somebody, I don't know who it was, I saw it on Twitter the other day, I wish I could credit them. I've always talked about, the log on the fire philosophy, Scott, but it's also, since it's everybody's really excited about it right now, it's kind of like hockey. Your defensive line needs to have different lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're like your first line, second line, you need to have talent on every single side. You can't just have your second line come in and they're absolutely crap and you give up a goal. Heavily rotated, still valuable. So he definitely in the field of play for the Falcons at 15.
Want to get to this next super from Corey Carter coming in. His draft, he wants James Pierce at 15, Jack Sawyer at 46, Jordan Hancock at 117. He's a cornerback, Ohio State, and then later on in the draft, Ty Hamilton, defensive tackle, Ohio State, and then Colin Oliver, linebacker, Oklahoma State. Defense. I agree with you there. I think if you need any depth on the offensive side of the ball, it should be handled during free agency. And the Falcons will have money to go for depth players on free agency, but they need to start investing in the draft. Again, I go on the offensive side of the ball, and I'm going to go left to right, and I'm going to include Kyle Pitts in this, and I'm going to go by position. So I'll go wide receiver over to wide receiver, and I'll scoop down into the backfield. But it goes first round, second round, fourth round, first round. That's your offensive line. Then into your backfield, it's Bijan and Michael Penix, first round. Kyle Pitts, first round. And then it's a pair of free agents, I believe, is what if I had that right, which was Ray McLeod and Darnell Mooney. On the other side of the ball, I'm not even sure who else starting anymore, but if it's Grady Jarrett, 5th round, okay, he's outplayed that. But then it's free agent. The only first rounder out there from your own group of players is AJ Terrell. That's it. Everything else is you've either had to patchwork together or try and strike gold in later rounds, and it shows. It shows. The Falcons haven't played defense since the 70s consistently. It shows. Stephen B coming on this. He says, is paying a pass rusher $100+ million all that great a thing? Who is the top 5 elite pass rushers on Philly, KC, Buffalo, and Baltimore? Now, when we talk about $100 million, we're also talking about investment and putting first round, premium draft picks into it. Guys that if they're good, they end up being $100 million player guys. Now, Steven, Philly, this is easy. Is Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. Those are $100 million guys. They're not paying them $100 million because they used a premium investment in them. Chris Jones is a multi-$100 million guy and a
first ballot Hall of Famer
for Kansas City. The Rams, they won a Super Bowl. Aaron Donald is one of those guys. Buffalo, Baltimore. Are you really gonna have this discussion with me about investing on defense in Baltimore? I mean, come on now. So when we talk about paying, we talk about investing, whether it's picks or whether it's money on that. It's not necessarily free agents. You don't want to build through free agency anyway. But if you've got a guy like Jalen Carter, who if he hit the open market would be $100 million guy, and you're paying him on a rookie contract, you win Super Bowls. So that's the answer to that one, Steven.
And just bringing it back there real quick, 3 of those 4 teams listed have 3 of the 4 best quarterbacks in football. Obviously, pass rusher matters, but like compared to the best quarterbacks in football on a tier of their own, there's levels to this still. So again,
they're still good at the number 1 position. And again, the Falcons have done something to try and right the ship a little bit. And Keith comes in over on Facebook. He says, like, but you are paying quarterback position the highest on your team. Yeah, and that's even worse. when you're using the most money on a position and then not playing that person, that's even worse. That's an anchor. That's I've got it upside down and the anchor is still dragging me down. That's even worse. But again, the Falcons have addressed this. They started to address this last year with investment on the defensive line and the quarterback position. So now it's just a matter of, okay, good. Keep going that way. Keep going that way. Now it's time to go, to keep going in the premium position. And that said, Nick, coming into this draft, knowing that the Falcons are a pretty good team, I think they've got talent they should be in the playoffs, or else they were 1 game away last year, or else they wouldn't have fired their defensive coordinator. If they didn't go with a premium position in this class, but they got a premium player at 15, I wouldn't be upset. I really wouldn't. If you were to say, okay, I can turn a strength into a superpower with Malachi Starks at 15. Well, say, Scott, you just got done saying the team's upside down. I know I did. But the offensive side of the ball, I think, is fairly well set. You have invested in defensive end. If you don't like the edges, because the worst thing you can do out of all of this is miss. That's the worst thing for your team. It's not that you missed on Jamar Chase. It's that Kyle Pitts can't play. If Kyle Pitts was who you drafted him to be, you wouldn't give a damn that Jamar Chase is killing it up in Cincinnati. So don't miss. You cannot reach. So there's always, it's never binary. There's always some conversation to be had in any of these discussions, despite the fact that the conversations on social media are always yes or no. There's always options, Nick.
Yeah, there are always options. Absolutely. And this team, again, it's luckily where they sit it. I mean, it's not as good of a draft, but it's a meat and potatoes draft, especially the defensive front. And I know the Falcons went heavy on the defensive front last season as well. That's one thing that's frustrating about the Falcons, right? They haven't used like their premium pick on the defensive line, but they've used a lot of day 2 picks, and it's a graveyard. So again, it's been not just a misallocation. It's been as much of a misevaluation of prospects as it has been a misallocation of resources.
Yeah, Arnold Ebiketie, is okay. And then the day 2's been dreadful. It's been really bad. I saw some Thomas Dimitroff love in here, which I'm not. I've put more slander on Thomas Dimitroff's name than just about anybody. He's had he overdrafted skill positions on offense. The team was completely unbalanced, and by the time he tried to correct it, it was too late. But the guys that he drafted, he typically hit more often. He just had an unbalanced team. But the evaluations were better. The evaluations for the Atlanta Falcons in the draft, I think, have been pretty poor, actually.
Yeah.
And I think the pro scouting department has been nails. I think the pro, except for the Kirk Cousins thing, who was playing awesome before he, jerked his shoulder and elbow out of socket. I think the pro scouting department has been money. That's been the big difference. The Dimitroff was a pretty good talent evaluator at the college level, and that mattered. You look at the guys that he brought in were the core of the golden age of the Atlanta Falcons. The free agents that the Falcons have actually been the spine of your team under Terry Fontenot, along with, again, your top 10 picks. But outside of the top 10, you haven't gotten a ton of value out of there. And yes, I know there's exceptions. I do. But overall, that first draft, your day two was Richie Grant and Jalen Mayfield. You know, Zach Harrison's been okay. They don't play him. Arnold Ebiketti's been a guy. You know, those are pretty big misses out there.
I mean, you talk about Malone as well. Zach Harrison, who I liked coming out, but he's been a stiff kind of a positionless player. Maybe he'll find a home in Jeff Ulbricht's scheme. I mean, it's also kind of hard with the young guys too, Scott, because you're on your third defensive coordinator in 3 years, and like it's not only you're drafting guys for scheme, especially the further you get from the first round. You're more and more niche in your usage, but the development, right? The positional coaches keep changing in and out too, so it's hard to even develop anybody when you're that fragile and volatile in your coaching staff. So yeah, hopefully some stability here. Hopefully the Falcons aren't another year. I know we were ready to fire Morris, but like, gosh, man, it is hard to build anything if you're just constantly changing guys in and out. So we'll see what happens here with that side of the ball. But yeah, the Falcons in a weird spot, and it's unfortunate all the dead cap hit stuff, especially because of the state of the NFC South. I mean, it's up for grabs, so anything could happen. Still,
missed opportunity, so to speak. There's somebody there that could come in, and the AFC South's a little bit like that too. If you're the Jaguars or the Colts, the Texans tried, but then they kind of took a little bit of a step back, but they seem to be headed in the right direction overall. But the NFC South is in a state of flux. The NFC South, when Matt Ryan and Sean Payton were there, and Cam Newton and the Panthers, Tampa Bay wins a Super Bowl, the NFC South was money. Now it's that everything comes in cycles. Well, it's our turn again down here in the South. It's our turn. But what do you think? Before we get out of here, why don't we do
let's do it,
a mock draft here real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've got entire screen. So this is our pre-NFL Combine mock draft. Let me zoom in on this just a shade. I think that should be okay. And let's hit play on this one.
I did want to hit a comment real quick. We had a mock draft from Corey that we didn't even really touch on too much. On the super chat, you flashed it, but we didn't say anything. And I did want to shout out to him. 2 edge rushers early. Maybe we'll do that today. But his first pick for the Falcons is James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. And there's been a couple things here where we're keeping an ear out. I think we talked about it last week with Daniel Jeremiah not mocking Pierce in his first round at all, despite the tape. I'm like, maybe there's something going on there. Also, sometimes, maybe you or I hear something and we don't want to put it on air because, it's not verified. But then Dane Brugler comes out and says there's 3 players who have some background character stuff that teams are going to want to check in on. And James Pierce being one of the all defensive front players who are first rounders. There's James Pierce Jr. There's questions about, what makes him tick, his love of football, just working with coaches and players and stuff. There was Walter Nolan from Ole Miss defensive tackle who's been mocked, first round, really talented. I think he was the number 1 overall high school recruit in that class over Travis Hunter that year, went to Texas A&M, transferred to Ole Miss. There's Dane said there was more issues coming out of Texas A&M than he heard at Ole Miss. And then also somebody that Falcons fans love or clamoring for, Mike Green, dismissed from Virginia Tech. There's some weirdness in his background as well that he's going to have to answer for. The fact that he's getting mocked in the top 10, I think he already did answer it to some extent at the Senior Bowl. But those are 3 players listed by name from Dane Brugler. So it's not just, speculation on our side when we can talk about it and report it a little bit. So thank you for the super chat, Corey, mentioning Pierce there. We're keeping an ear out because again, he was mentioned as a character flagged player at this point.
And this is why we don't do trades because it's too easy to trade. The Patriots are offering us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can't even count that high. 8 or 9 draft picks for the 15 spot. But nothing on day 1, but a second, third, 3 7s, and then a third, fourth, and 6th next year. Would I do that? Yeah, I'd do that for this team. You need a lot of players and it's spread across 2 years. So no, that's too easy. we're sitting here, and this looks interesting already. There's some options here already, Nick.
Yeah.
There's been some different evaluations on Will Johnson at corner. Could you take corner at this spot? Abso-freaking-lutely, you could. Mike Hughes, and nobody was good. So when I say Mike Hughes and D. Alford and Justin Simmons and David Onyemata, when I say they weren't good, I'm not necessarily blaming them for it, because nobody played as well in 2024 as they did in 2023, with the possible exception of Caden Ellis and AJ Terrell across the entire defense, 3 deep. But Mike Hughes is a free agent. D. Alford's a free agent in your nickel. You absolutely need another corner. You needed another corner last year, and it was naive to go into the season status quo without addressing that place in the secondary, and it showed. You could go corner here. Tyler Warren, please no. I love this guy. I absolutely love him. And if you move on from Pitts, you get some money and a day 3 for Pitts, then Tyler Warren makes sense for this. Again, investing back into the Michael Penix thing. But by God, it's time to start putting some investment into the defense, isn't it? Malachi Starks, again, safety is one of the least valuable positions in the NFL, but if I've got the best safety tandem in the NFL, I should have a pretty good defense, if I'm using them correctly here. I just don't know that Malachi Starks is Kyle Hamilton, who went number 14 to the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah. You mentioned you got Luther Burden a little bit further down too. One thing, I mean, it's ornamental. You cannot do it, but with how Penix played at Washington, it was very 11 personnel heavy, and the way he can spray the ball, getting space creators and explosive players like that is interesting. Mike Green is there as well. He's definitely on the clock. We talked about Kenneth Grant earlier, Walter Nolan. I mean, the way the board's set up, Scott, it's like, hey, if somebody picking, 18 to 22 wants to come up, please. I'd maybe even, trade value chart or whatnot. I got enough options here. I'm still going to be really happy. I know who I want to call for here, Scott, but I did again. One that I keep pushing this point. A lot of people think Josh Simmons is the best tackle in football, and if it wasn't for his injury, he'd be going top 10. He has left tackle and right tackle experience, and McGarry's not a long-term option, obviously, for this team. We'll see what happens with him with his contract. He's not the one that I think we have to take. I think we got to take Will Johnson, but I just think I'm of the belief that offensive tackle at least has to be thought of in these experiments right now because of the importance in Michael Penix, and just you need to build a top 10 offensive line for where Penix is at. That should be a goal.
You're not going to get a lot of argument, Nick, if you say I can cut Caleb McGarry and save $15 million and get a better right side protector, and then I can go invest $15 million into the defense with cash. You're not going to get a ton of argument from Falcons fans on that one, because it's not just that I'm replacing Caleb McGarry, who a lot of Falcons fans think needs to happen regardless. His contract's got to change anyway. Mm-hmm. So are you going to extend Caleb McGarry and save a little money, then you've got him for 2 years, or move on? So offensive tackle is absolutely on the table here because of the financial implications, the right side protection implications. That said, I want to go with the board here and say if I've got a chance to get a corner who is the number 8, let's just say this is the Falcons board, I'm taking Will Johnson.
And I will add, Scott, talking out of both sides of my mouth on this one. Combine does matter for cornerback. And Will Johnson, there's a lot of intrigue for him for his 40 time. There's a very clear, if he runs a 4.5 or even a 4.45, there's going to be some concern for him, and he will drop. I mean, he might even fall past 15 if he runs that slow. Did not have a good season this year. Injury issues as well. Maybe looked a little checked out as well. It's like, I'm going to be a top 10 pick. Is that a concern? We didn't end up being a concern for Derek Stingley, who kind of checked out after his freshman season, where he looked like the best freshman cornerback we've ever seen. But I'm here taking Will Johnson. His combine is going to be interesting. Also for Simmons, combine is going to be interesting for the medical stuff. So I think it was a torn patella suffered week 5 for him. So again, this interesting conversation. You got your edges as well, multiple edges here. I would love to trade back, 18 to 22.
I still like Mike Green in this spot. That's where I am leaning for number 15 for the Falcons. But if I'm looking at this board and we assume that this is the board and this is right, the Falcons can go corner over edge if they're getting the best player also along with it. So I'm okay. So just for the sake of changing things up a little bit, I want to draft Will Johnson, and then let's see who's at 46, because we've seen Jack Sawyer there. We've seen other guys there. And then as Corey Carter comes back in, he says, if we drafted Tyler Warren this year after passing on Brock Bowers last year, I would be sick. Last year I wanted to take Bowers and trade Pitts. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And again, if Warren turns out to be phenomenal, then great. But it's just it's a lesser version of I just spent $90 million on a quarterback and now I'm using a first round draft pick on a quarterback because I effed up the $90 million on the quarterback. It's just it feels like a bit of a waste, especially again at a non-premium position like tight end to dump, 2 top 15 picks in 5 years at the tight end position and running back.
Yeah.
Whew. It's a tough sell, Corey. I'm with you on this one because Brock is better at this stage than Tyler is. Brock's a better prospect than Tyler is. And yeah, would I do this? Would I move down 4 spots to pick up a 5th and a 6th next year? Yes, I would, but I'm not gonna.
Got to get through those stupid ads though.
Yeah, that will keep me from coming back if they don't get this figured out because I can't reject. Okay, Now again, here's your Emmanwori. Here's your chance at another edge in Jack Sawyer. Big defensive end here. The Boston College kid. Here's your corner. God. I'm not a huge fan of Princely, honestly. I like Jared Ivey better than him.
Different type of players. I think
it
Ivey's
is very different
more
type of player, but I don't think Princely is a good enough. I'm not a fan of Princely. I don't want him in the second round.
Yeah. And scroll down even more. I absolutely love JT Tuimoloau. I don't think that we'll see where the consensus board changes here.
Darius is coming up.
Are you concerned about Darius Alexander's age? Do you know how old he actually is?
Is he 24?
I think he's going to be 20, maybe even 25, 26 this upcoming year.
That becomes a little tough. I've gone back and looked at some of these guys. The one I knew Calvin Ridley was a double holdback because he aged out. He was 20 years old in high school and wasn't allowed to finish his senior season. Mm-hmm. I knew that. But I've looked back at a couple other Falcons first-round picks, and it's like these guys were 24 also. No wonder they were done after their first contracts. Where'd this guy go? Oh, he was 30 years old. Yeah. So quarterback, that doesn't bother me. I'm not talking about Michael Penix, y'all. I don't care about quarterback. Quarterback, he can play for a decade. A quarterback's prime is 30 to 35 years old. That I'm not talking about him, but I am talking about position players. If this is your favorite edge, you're going to have to do
frustrating me too. This. I mean, we could also go. It's really tough because we don't have a lot of.
This is your favorite edge. I'd like to go edge here, and we already went corner.
I think there's also something to be said about Awazarike. I'm really curious to see how he.
Awazarike is not on here.
The Boston College edge, whose name's.
Is it the same?
Awazarike, yeah.
No, Awazarike plays for the
Ezaraku. Excuse me. Ezaraku. Donovan Ezaraku. I'm really curious to see how he tests. He's got so many tools in his pass rush move. I don't know if he's an absolute athlete. And also, if I had a redo in this, Scott, with where the board's at right now, seeing where there's a lower value on a guy, I would probably go back and say Mike Green and then get Azare Thomas, who's one pick below here, who is, I think, going to be a first-round pick. He's one below Ezaraku here. But yeah, you already went cornerback. He can't go with another boundary cornerback. I think it's got to be
BC.
Yep, got to be pass rush here. Although, Emmanwori is interesting with how much, cover 3 you see with Ulbrich and cover 1. You're going to have some Bates is more of a free safety look, and Emmanwori could be a pretty good player with that. But pretty interesting. And I see Jack Sawyer under. I honestly like JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State even more than Jack Sawyer. But is what it is.
117. I've got another corner here. I've got a safety. The third-ranked player on the board is a safety. I definitely need a safety. Now, this is where a place where I could start looking at cornerback or at safety and linebacker possibly. Mm-hmm. This is the guy Quentin wants. Quentin says Braden Swinson. I'm telling you, so slept on in the draft. Watch the film. I'll check him out. I don't know too much about him. I didn't watch LSU a ton this year. I don't remember him being at the Senior Bowl.
He had a good Senior Bowl game, I believe. Really didn't stand out in practice.
I remember Savion Jones being there. I don't remember.
It might have been Savion Jones. Yeah, actually, I might be mixing him up there. Denzel Burke, I wouldn't take here. Jordan Phillips, I mean, young player. Savion Jones. There's Savion Jones, too.
Here's Savion Jones.
I really like Chris Paul.
I'll say, but, there's a lot of people talking about him at linebacker. Definitely need a linebacker here. Linebacker or safety. But if I'm looking at this board, if I'm going on this board, safety is a higher position on here, which absolutely fits a need. And then hopefully I can get my inside linebacker maybe in free agency and take a swing on a guy coming up, and then hope that Troy Anderson's your best option if he's healthy, but I'm not going into 2025 with my job on the line counting on Troy Anderson's health.
Yeah.
I'm going to go safety here, Penn State.
Yeah, I like Kevin Winston. He had injuries this last season, but he is a phenomenal downhill alley player. At good size.
Good in coverage. Smale London is damn good in coverage.
Yeah, I think Winston's, you never want him to be your single high guy left alone, which does, I think, limit you a little bit as far as how you're playing. But he is such a good tackler, Scott, in the open field. If you want to play like nickel as your base, you have to have your 5 defensive backs tackle, and he can tackle with the best of them. So I like him a lot in that role. And I think he had like no missed tackles in 2023 or something. Again, 6'2", 210 pounds. I think he'll test well. I think he's still a little bit raw on the mental side of the game. But again, the athletic package, the tackling, the physicality, the size, it all is very interesting.
OMT reminds us that Fontenot is head of NFL scouting with the Saints. That's his specialty. He's good at it. He is. He kept the team afloat with really good bargain basement free agents just to fill out the defensive line, especially. And then his hits, when they did have some money in 2023, every single player they signed was a hit. So he's done a good job with that. Need a linebacker here. I like Shamar James. The 2 teams I watched the most in college were Florida and Auburn. And I really like Shamar James. He is the 5th highest guy left on the board. He is at a need. We're going to go Shamar James. Maybe not his junior year, but his 2023, when he got hurt like the last 4 games of the season, the points against Florida that year like doubled. It was insane. He's a really good player. I'd feel really, really happy about getting him at this spot. But again, defense on this. We went corner, we went edge, we went safety, we went linebacker. I expect Will Johnson to be a starter. I expect a second-round edge to compete for starting. And then and I expect safety and linebacker to add depth and maybe start as well coming in with only 4 picks. That's kind of what you're looking at there. So let us know how you think in the comments as we get done with that. I'd be, I'm biased because we did it, but I'd be happy with that haul. And again, right now I am leaning at Mike Green at 15. He was there. That's probably where I'd go, but it'd be kind of boring if we did that every single time. And just a reminder that if that was the Falcons board, they would have no problem taking a cornerback in that spot. Premium position, best player on the board, fills a need, instant starter. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Those are all good things. Nick, any last words before we get out of here?
Just going through these mock drafts, you guys need to figure out, Falcons need to figure out how to get some more picks. I don't know if that's like trading Kyle Pitts as an asset on this team right now. Maybe a trade. I don't know what the market would be like. Like, it sucks to like talk about trading Tyler Algier, but 1 year contract left. You have Bijan. You're about to let him walk for nothing. I mean, I just don't even know what the market would be in the draft.
Tyler Algier before the draft, though, when there's so many players in this draft. That's the problem I have with Tyler Algier. Is even Kirk Cousins for that matter. You want to trade him before his $10 million bonus kicks in. But if I need a quarterback, if I need a running back, I want to wait till after the draft, especially at running back. It's like, because people say, well, I don't want to let him walk for 1 year, have him after 1 year, just let him walk. Well, he only has 1 year on his contract with another team also. Do you think they want to? if you're a player away, let's say the San Francisco 49ers and Christian McCaffrey gets bad news on his knee and I need a running back to really flush out my playoff ready offense, or the Denver Broncos, and Kyle, I think the Cowboys are too far away for a move like that. They want to draft a guy. So I just don't I don't see that. I think he is much more important to the Falcons than anything you would get in return, because anybody that wants a running back will try and get one in the draft.
Yeah, and the value you're talking about is probably maybe a 5th rounder, 6th rounder, and is that worth it compared to letting him walk? So, yeah, it's tough. Somebody's probably going to get a good value for him. It feels like the opposite end of the spectrum of when the Falcons signed Michael Turner, who was behind LaDainian Tomlinson all those years. Like, oh, he was the backup. Have you watched him? He's pretty freaking good. So, yeah,
no, I actually use that as an example. The happiest guy that Bijan Robinson is there should be Tyler Algier, because he's made $4 million on his rookie contract. He'll make $4 million next year on his next contract in 2026. He'll double his money as a pro. And frankly, he's valuable enough to the Atlanta Falcons, and running backs are cheap enough. Re-signing Tyler Algier is not out of the equation. It's not. It's not. If I've got $12 million in my running back room and I've got the best running back room in the NFL, okay, that's not out of the equation. Now, he might want to be the guy that gets 300 touches and has his choice to go play for a different team. We'll see. But re-signing Tyler Algier is not completely off the table.
Yeah, without a doubt. So fun to do the mocks. Again, it comes back to, you got to figure out how to get more picks for this Falcons team. Probably trading back from 15 is the most likely scenario, but we'll see. Who knows? But yeah, no, nothing else here. Got to hop on the Broncos stuff here and get rolling. And I am also out pretty much, so I need a refill of blind coffee.
I just finished mine and went to water. Just finished mine. So we're gonna get out of here. We'll be back on Wednesday. We'll have some reactions to Terry Fontenot, Raheem Morris, and their comments at the NFL Combine. We'll react to some of the numbers that start coming in and see how that goes. So make sure you join us on Wednesday for sure. Want to say thank you to our Super Chat superstars like Corey coming in a couple times, like GHP coming in, B-Side Rap Reviews. Always good to see you, my friend. Edward Brown, and of course, the Ronk, the Sunrise, keeping the lights on here, and Michael Ranquillo. Thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Share it on Facebook. That helps us out even more. And we will see you on Wednesday. Thanks for being here, everybody. Y'all have a good rest of your week and enjoy this warm weather coming into the South.